Imagine a world without light switches. A world where once the sun sets, the darkness isn't just a lack of light. It's a presence. It's a cover for things unseen, a silent accomplice. We've grown so accustomed to our technology, to the ability to banish the night with the flick of a switch. But are we truly prepared if that ability were to disappear? Or will history in its darkest form repeat itself? What London experienced over a century ago wasn't just about poverty or politics. It was about one simple, terrifying thing: darkness. Before the city was bathed in electric light, the night belonged to the shadows. British court records from that era are filled with countless crimes that happened after sunset. Attackers who vanished into black alleys and victims who never saw the face of their assailant. The night wasn't just a time of day. It was a perfect disguise. No light meant no witnesses, and no witnesses meant the perpetrator remained a ghost. As one old record starkly put it, the offender fled into the darkness. Take, for example, the winter of 1911, the Ratcliffe Highway in East London, a bustling road by day transformed at dusk. It became a name whispered in hushed tones, never spoken aloud after nightfall. Located near the port, it was crowded with workers and sailors during daylight hours. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the road lost its features, sinking into a thick, inky blackness, broken only by the faint, distant glow from a few windows. In one house near this very road, an entire family was found murdered. The neighbors heard nothing. No screams, no struggle. The doors weren't forced. It was as if the crime had been committed in absolute silence, under the cloak of a night that saw nothing and could bear witness to no one. When the police finally arrived, the questions far outnumbered the answers. There were no witnesses, no clear tracks, no explanation for how a killer could enter and leave without a single person seeing them. Just a few days later, on that same road, another house became a crime scene. The horror was identical. The same chilling silence, the same brutal efficiency, and the same terrifying outcome that left nothing behind but a deepening fear that spread through the community like a contagion. The night was thick, the street had no real lighting, and shadows danced with every gust of wind. It became impossible to tell the difference between a harmless stranger passing by and a killer hiding just out of sight. The newspapers of the time offered no comfort. They couldn't. Instead, they settled on a single headline, repeated over and over again: "The killer escapes into the darkness, and the city is powerless to catch him." People began bolting their doors long before sunset. Candles were lit in every home, not just to push back the gloom, but to try and soothe their own trembling hearts. They hoped that fear could be locked outside, but the truth was far simpler and far harsher. The darkness wasn't just in the streets. It was in the terrifying unknown that was never brought to light. The killer was never definitively caught. The case remained open, a scar on London's memory. It stands as one of the most horrifying crimes in the city's history, a living testament to what darkness can conceal when no one can see, and when everyone is too afraid to look too closely. Let's rewind just a year to a cold night in December 1910 in the Houndsditch district. This area of London was also submerged in a near-total blackout. The street lighting that did exist was weak, pathetic, barely revealing the shape of the road. The alleys were narrow, perfect for shadows to hide in. Visibility after sunset was so poor that any mysterious movement became an instant source of alarm for anyone daring to be out. On this particular night, the heavy calm was about to be shattered by an explosion of violence that would change the district forever. It started as a failed robbery attempt at a jewelry store. The plan was likely for a silent, covert operation. But a neighbor heard strange, unexplainable sounds deep in the night. Wisely, they chose to alert the police. Officers arrived on the scene, moving cautiously through a street that offered them no clear line of sight. They had no idea they were walking into an armed confrontation. They had no way of knowing that the very darkness surrounding them would prevent them from seeing the danger until it was far too late. Suddenly, as they approached the building, the door burst open. Gunfire erupted from within, plunging the next few seconds into absolute chaos. In the pitch black, 3 police officers were killed and several others were wounded. On a street that lacked enough light to see more than a few feet ahead, it was impossible to tell who fired first or who was standing behind the muzzle flashes. The darkness made it impossible for the police to even determine how many attackers they were facing. Faces were blurs if they were seen at all. The chaos, the terrible visibility, and the grim London winter night all conspired to help the suspects escape. Here, the darkness didn't create the crime, but it made it bloodier, more chaotic, and infinitely more mysterious. Despite an intensive citywide manhunt, the police failed to capture the perpetrators immediately. The investigation eventually led to the famous siege of Sydney Street in 1911, a dramatic showdown that happened in broad daylight. But that event was an echo of a single, dark night, a night where killers vanished, and the darkness kept its secrets, as it still does to this day. These stories aren't just relics of the past. They're a stark reminder of our own dependence on light, on the systems we've built to keep the darkness at bay. They force us to ask a chilling question: what would happen if those systems failed? What secrets would our modern nights hold if they were plunged back into the shadows of history? Imagine a world without light, a world where the familiar glow of your city is suddenly extinguished, plunging millions into an abyss of darkness. You might think this is the stuff of a post-apocalyptic movie, but for one of the world's greatest cities, this nightmare became a reality. This isn't just about a few flickering lights. It is about what happens when the very fabric of society is torn apart by a simple flick of a switch. We often think of darkness as a temporary inconvenience, a page in a book that time will eventually turn. But what if that darkness unleashes something primal, something terrifying that lurks just beneath the surface of our civilized world? Today, we journey back to a time and place where this happened, a story that serves as a chilling reminder of our own fragility. It is time to reconsider everything you thought you knew about the thin line between order and chaos. The year is 1977. The city is New York. On a hot July evening, a series of lightning strikes hit several crucial power substations. One by one, the city's power grids began to fail. At first, it was just a flicker, a momentary lapse that most New Yorkers barely noticed. But then, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, the lights started going out. The iconic skyline, a beacon of human achievement, dissolved into a black void. Within an hour, all 5 boroughs of New York City were plunged into complete and utter darkness. This wasn't just a minor power cut. This was the 1977 New York City blackout, a catastrophic event that would last for a grueling 25 hours and expose the city's deepest vulnerabilities. The city that never sleeps was forced into an unwilling slumber, and what awoke in the darkness was a monster. In the initial moments, there was confusion. People were stranded. The subway system, the city's circulatory system, ground to a halt. Thousands of passengers were trapped underground in pitch-black tunnels, the air growing hot and stale. On the streets above, a different kind of chaos was brewing. Traffic lights went dead, turning intersections into a demolition derby of screeching tires and crunching metal. The familiar hum of the city was replaced by an eerie silence, punctuated by the growing symphony of sirens. For many, the first instinct was to find a way home. But with no trains and gridlocked streets, that was easier said than done. People walked for miles, navigating the darkened sidewalks by the faint light of the moon. It was a surreal, almost cinematic experience. But as the hours stretched on, the initial novelty wore off, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It was an absence of control, an absence of the rules that governed their daily lives. And that's when it began. The first window was shattered, then another, and another. What started as isolated acts of opportunism quickly snowballed into a citywide frenzy of looting. In neighborhoods like Bushwick, Bedford-Stuyvesant, and the South Bronx, store gates were pried open and crowds poured in, grabbing everything they could carry. It wasn't just electronics and jewelry. People were taking furniture, clothing, food, anything that wasn't bolted down. The scenes were apocalyptic. People were seen rolling shopping carts filled with stolen goods down the middle of the street. Some even used their cars to ram through storefronts. Over 1,600 stores were vandalized and looted. The financial cost was staggering, but the social cost was even greater. This wasn't just theft, it was the complete breakdown of social order. Why did this happen? It's important to understand the context of the time. The 1970s were a difficult period for New York. The city was on the brink of bankruptcy, public services had been cut, and unemployment was high. A scorching heat wave had gripped the city for days, fraying tempers and making life unbearable, especially for those in poor neighborhoods without air conditioning. The blackout was the spark that ignited a powder keg of social and economic frustration. For some, it was an opportunity born of desperation. For others, it was a moment of pure, unadulterated anarchy. The police were completely overwhelmed. The sheer scale of the looting was something they had never prepared for. With over 9 million people in the dark and chaos erupting simultaneously in multiple locations, they were stretched impossibly thin. In the first few hours, police dispatchers were flooded with thousands of calls. Officers rushing to one incident would pass dozens of others happening in plain sight. They simply didn't have the manpower to respond. In several neighborhoods, the police effectively declared a state of emergency, admitting they could not maintain control. They were forced to make difficult choices, prioritizing fires and life-threatening situations over property crime. This created a vacuum of authority, a lawless environment where the mob ruled the night. By the time the power was finally restored, over 3,000 people had been arrested, the highest number of arrests in the city's history for a single event. The city's jails were overflowing. The aftermath was devastating. Business owners returned to find their life's work destroyed, their stores gutted and empty. Many of these small, family-run shops would never reopen, leaving permanent scars on their communities. The blackout didn't just cause a night of chaos. It accelerated the decline of already struggling neighborhoods, a blow from which some areas took decades to recover. But amidst the darkness, there were also glimmers of light. Stories emerged of neighbors helping neighbors, of strangers sharing candles and batteries. In some parts of the city, communities banded together to protect local stores. Volunteers directed traffic with flashlights. People organized impromptu block parties, trying to make the best of a bad situation with acoustic guitars and shared stories. These acts of kindness and solidarity are an important part of the story, a testament to the fact that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can choose compassion over chaos. A single point of failure can trigger a cascade of events with devastating consequences. It also shows us what can happen when social trust erodes and desperation takes hold. It's a complex picture, one that defies simple explanations. It wasn't just about good versus evil. It was about a perfect storm of technical failure, social inequality, and human nature under extreme pressure. The story of the New York blackout is a cautionary tale. It forces us to ask ourselves, what would happen if the lights went out in our city today? Have we learned the lessons of the past? Are we prepared, not just technically, but socially, for that kind of crisis? This is New York. In an era where cities are run by smart systems and precise surveillance, the question remains, how can an entire city go dark so easily? Was what happened merely a technical coincidence? Or did darkness once again find its way to play with people's minds when visibility disappeared? Did solar storms affect satellites and power grids? Or does conspiracy theory have another opinion? Was Venezuela the last case? Certainly not. But let me ask you, when will it be your city's turn? Be prepared for total darkness or an eternal blackout.